Okay, hey guys. So our new topic as we continue to move forward in our ecology unit is going to be population ecology, which looks at how populations are interacting with their community and their ecosystem, as well as how they might be impacting it, and sort of like the dynamics of that type of stuff. So in this picture, what we see is a really big herd of elephants, which is great because they do get hunted by humans and stuff, and there is some issues with elephant endangerment. So this is actually, great picture to see how many there are. And so I'm sure if we were in class and I asked some questions, people could come up with some pretty good answers to like what might this population do to this ecosystem. So, when you're talking about this many elephants, especially like in here, they're definitely going to be like trampling and killing other organisms without even realizing it. And that's going to affect the community. Certainly insects and small animals are not going to maybe get out of the way, right? So, or be able to. They're also going to trample plants and stuff. They're also going to eat plants, and that could then affect, the food web and how much food is available for themselves and other animals. And then, let's say they come across like a small amount of water, they might drink it all up and then just keep moving on. And that would affect the ecosystem because if you remember from last week's notes, or 5.3, ecosystems, or actually it might have been 5.2, ecosystems include biotic factors like the elephants and trees here, and abiotic factors like the water. So if they drink up a water hole, that's actually going to affect communities that need the water, and the ecosystem itself includes the water. So, and one of the things that's kind of cool about this picture too is how this up here, these ones, or maybe even just one, is leading the group, and they talk about how elephants have like really incredible memories and are really intelligent. And often, if not always actually, they're sort of led by what might be called like a matriarch, which is like a female that leads the group and is kind of in charge actually. And so I'm, sort of assuming here that the matriarch is up in front and she remembers like where they go when they're looking for new resources because they appear to be migrating, that's for sure. So, and maybe it's to water. Okay, so we're going to start with population dynamics, which could be interpreted as sort of how they fluctuate. That's what, like, if something's dynamic, it means it kind of changes or fluctuates. So this is based on the balance of population numbers and how they're crucial for ecosystem stability. And that's shown in a numbers pyramid, which was part of 5-3. So in a numbers pyramid, we almost always need more organisms at the bottom, except for some scenarios I explained in 5.3. But if we're talking about grass, we definitely have to have more blades of grass than rabbits, or rabbits have to have more than just one blade of grass to survive, right? So we have to have maybe thousands and thousands of blades of grass to feed hundreds of rabbits, and then the hundreds of rabbits might be able to feed dozens of foxes, and then the dozens of foxes might be able to feed 10 big eagles or something like that. And the eagles can also eat the rabbits, obviously. So, so this is so what we're going to talk about now is how these levels in the numbers pyramid can fluctuate and get smaller and bigger, and some of the dynamics of that. So we're going to start at the bottom and kind of work our way up. So we're going to start with the plants or producers. And so this one is very easy to visualize because when we're talking about numbers pyramids, it's basically mathematic. And so if we were in class and I asked questions like, how might this little island on this lake present challenges for these plants as far as limited resources, which we're going to talk about limits later, the people in class would be able to come up with very, accurate ideas. And so, because it's pretty obvious mathematically that this island just doesn't have enough resources to provide for, let's say, 100 of these trees. Like, that's just obviously not going to happen. And let alone 20 of these trees, let alone maybe 6 of these trees, because as of right now it looks like there's these 2, and then maybe a couple more trying to survive. So this is a good example, this little island here. as a situation where we might have too many producers. And so if we have too many producers for what's available in their environment, the resources, they're going to have to start competing a lot for light and water and space. And then eventually the producers are going to die off. There's, seeds are just not going to fully develop or whatever, and some of the plants that might have already sort of started surviving may not be able to compete as well for the water, for instance, as some of the other plants that have better roots or something, and they're going to die off, and the populations will decrease, and they're going to find a natural balance. The producers will pretty much balance out with their environment. We do have some producers like certain types of vines that can really overgrow and almost like destroy an environment a little bit, but generally producers like plants are just going to balance out with their resources like they did, what it appears they did on this island. All right, if there's not enough producers, so obviously here we see a picture of an orangutan in a bad situation, so I'll address that first. As we learned this semester, orangutans are dealing with a lot of problems with endangerment, and one of those problems is deforestation, which is what we see in this picture. The forest that the orangutans and other animals rely on has been destroyed. And so this is directly linked to problems that we're causing when we destroy forests for whatever reasons. And that's going to result in too few producers. So when there's not enough producers, like plants and algae, the next level up in the pyramid or food web would be the consumers, like the herbivores, and they're going to run out of food, and they're going to starve and die off, and their populations will decrease. So on the pyramid, that bar on the pyramid would start to shrink. And so what we see here is actually the orangutan has a tranquilizer dart. So hopefully someone's trying to rescue the orangutan and take it to a sanctuary. The fact that it's a tranquilizer dart is a good sign versus something more dangerous, and so I'm hoping that it was being rescued, and that's really great because it was probably really suffering in this area, and you can see its arms are just really skinny, and its hands in particular just don't look like a thick, healthy hand like they normally would have. So this is just a scenario where if we destroy forests, there's not enough producers, and then the animals or consumers will starve and die, and that'll work its way up the pyramid. So which we're going to talk about now. Like if the herbivores die, then the carnivores start to die. If there's too many herbivores, then producers can be eaten too fast, and the herbivores will run out of food, and so they're going to starve and die, and their populations should eventually decrease. So that's again just pretty straightforward math there. Not enough. Too many animals eating the plants, there eventually won't be enough plants, and eventually those animals are going to starve, or they have to find new resources. But typically that's challenging unless like a bird can just like take off. But most animals got to stay pretty close to where they live, or where they are. So the reason why I have rabbits here is because rabbits are known for rapid reproduction or over-reproduction, and can have big population explosions. And to some people, they're considered pests, actually. And even though they're cute, like in this picture, we got the cute little bunnies, what they can do is they can eat up all the grass. So what we're seeing here is these are holes that the rabbits live underground, and they've eaten up the plants around the holes, and it's really dried up and almost looks like sand, which is not soil. Might not be sand, but it definitely looks really dried out. And so this could be a big problem for farmers who want to use that grass. So for instance, and here's a little story that I always tell to all the classes. Highly recommend when you guys go to college that if you can do this, look into studying abroad, which I did, my brother did, and I did it for a quarter. When I was at UC Santa Barbara, I went for a quarter to study in New Zealand, and it was actually super cool. It was basically all like adventure stuff, and we traveled all over both islands, and we were like camping and backpacking and canoeing. We actually didn't even like ever sit in a real classroom. Our guide was also our teacher, and we would like write papers and have discussions and do stuff like that, and we were just always together doing these adventurous things. We hiked in like where there's glaciers, rainforests, volcanoes. Like we hiked through volcano parks and stuff, which was pretty crazy. And if you've ever seen the Lord of the Ring movies, that's New Zealand is where they're all filmed, and they filmed them there because New Zealand has a lot of different biomes and ecosystems. And we were traveling, so like I said, we'd be in a rainforest, and then we could be like at a glacier, in very close by, which is pretty different than the rest of the world, and that's why they filmed Lord of the Rings there. So, anyways, one of the things we did was stay on a sheep farm for I think a night or two with this farmer that our teacher was friends with, and sheep farming is a big industry in New Zealand, and so the second day, he took us out on his land, and we were learning about the problems he was having with the rabbits and the politics, actually, around this issue. And he's talking about he has all these problems, and it's too hard with the rabbits. He's like, it's too hard to just have somebody hunt them. He said they tried traps, and what now was being presented to the government was basically putting poison in the ground. And there was a lot of politics to that. Like, people are like, what if that kills other animals? Like, should we be just putting poison underground? What if when it rains, which it does in New Zealand, a lot, what if it rains and the poison runs into rivers? So there was a lot of politics happening, and this guy even said, he's like, I don't hate rabbits or anything. He's like, they're just eating up the grass that my sheep need, and it's really affecting my life and my family. So it's really interesting to see that firsthand. But we didn't see any rabbits, and we went out on his property, and we're like, we don't see anything. And there was like a hill and this big fields, and he shot off a gun, and all of a sudden rabbits were running in all directions, and we couldn't see any of them until he shot the gun, and they were basically hidden all over the place. And it really kind of showed what he was dealing with, and just learned about the politics. And because New Zealand is an island, which I've talked about this before, islands have to be extremely careful with their ecosystems because they're just such a small space. They can't, they have to be very careful with the space they have.